Fellow actors, writers, directors, and production crew, welcome to Small Talk with Tony, the interview series where we sit down with people in the biz to make small talk. I'm your host, the owner, chief storyteller, and the Tony behind Tony Video. Now, over the course of this series, you will hear stories and personal experiences from people just like you. So, let's make some small talk.
Actions always find a way to shine brighter than the things you say.
So, today's guest is the action-packed Greg Robbins. Greg is a local SAG actor and works in the world of stunts, whether it's falling, fighting, firearms, you name it. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California, Greg attended the Van Mar Academy for Motion Picture and Television Acting, as well as worked at Studio Picture Vehicles. He has founded his very own stunt team, the Greg Robbins Stunt Team, and I've had a chance to meet Greg at the Casting Buffalo Actors Expo. So, will everyone please join me in welcoming our next guest. Greg, thank you so much for taking the time for some small talk.
Oh my goodness, this is awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, Greg, I'm super excited to have you on the show. You know, I've seen some of your work, and I've always been a fan of stunt work and fight choreography and all that stuff. And because stunts are such a unique part of the industry, so I'm sure our viewers, as well as myself, would like to learn more about, what stunt work entails. So tell us about how you got your start in the industry.
Well, okay. When I was 10 years old, I was raised in Los Angeles, and my parents took us to Universal Studios tour. And I think it was brand new. It wasn't been around that long. And they had a stunt show. So we go and see this stunt show. And at that time, the theme was the Bonanza TV series, which I loved that series when I was a kid. And I watched this show, and I was enamored. I thought it was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. So we go home, and my parents had just had our house carpeted, and the old carpet and the padding was along the side of the house. So I drug it to in front of my garage, got up on the garage, and I started jumping off the roof of the garage into this pad. And I guess I never stopped.
Don't try this at home, kids. He's a professional. Yeah, well, I mean, that's a very interesting way to get started. But talk about the educational background that you need. Were there specific classes? Where did you go to study?
Well, from there, I studied acting at Van Mar Academy, and for 3 years, starting around 1979, and then in '82, I went to stunt school, and I started working for Studio Picture Vehicles, detailing cars, and because these were all stunt people, and learning more. When all they did was 8 acres of studio cars, and they delivered cars to all the shows. So I started mounting roll cages, setting idles, eventually spot welding cages, and I delivered a lot of vehicles to a lot of shows like T.J. Hooker, Moonlighting, Fall Guy, BG and the Bear, Knight Rider, Heart to Heart. The list goes on and on and on.
Well, it seems like you had a lot of different experiences, and that exposed you to these different opportunities. So talk to us about your first big role. How did you know that you finally made it, or at least you started your journey?
Well, when I make it, I'll let you know. The first thing I did was on an independent movie called Beastmaster, and then after that I did another one on a movie called Prime Risk. And then these were low-budget indie movies. And then I also, Playing with Fire, I stunt doubled for, goodness gracious, Jeffrey Combs on that. But right around there, I got hired as the extra casting coordinator for the Terminator, the original Terminator. And I hired all the extra stand-ins and some stunts. I even helped out with the iguana and the dogs in it. And I got my first stunt job. Jim Cameron, he put me in that movie everywhere. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Everywhere you see him, he would call Jim, or Jim would go, get Greg. And also Gail Ann Hurd and Donna Smith, who's a UPM, were really super good to me, and I owe them a great deal. In fact, I'm still friends with Donna Smith, and I ran into Gail Hurd at a NATPE not long ago. But Jim had put me in at doing stunts. I got killed in the police station 3 times. I got blown up in the future once, and did a car gag in the future scene. And I'm the Tiki Motel customer. When Sarah and Reese make love at that hotel, and then the next day they rip that guy out of the truck and they take off in the black truck. That's me. And yeah, so and it's weird because Jim had this insight to my career that I certainly did not. It was well into post production. We had finished Principal for about a month, and we were doing pickup shots. Like I said, I was on it from the beginning of pre production, every single day, all the way through production, well into deep into post production, and we were doing this futuristic thing that he needed, that he wanted. And afterwards, he had this little like projector that he would run the tape through, and he would add hand crank, and he would sit and look in the monitor. And I'm sitting there over his shoulder, and I'm looking at it, and told me, he says, look, when you go into directing, pick a path. Don't try and do everything. You're a creative guy. Stick to what you know. Gain a working knowledge of all of this, but just stick to what you know and what your passion is. And I remember saying to him, dude, I'm just an actor and a stuntman. I'm never going to direct. And he kind of rolled his eyes, and I think back on that all the time, like he really knew what he was talking about.
No, that's pretty cool. I mean, being able to work with James Cameron, and getting these pearls of wisdom from such a legendary director. And what's nice about your experience is that the more people you worked with, the more you grew, by learning different things and getting a different perspective ultimately. So you mentioned that you were born and raised on the West Coast. So talk to us about some of the things that got you to move to the East Coast.
Well, I had this idea for a sitcom, and I started writing it. And after developing it and going through all of the steps that I won't bore you with formulating, and I realized that I had just created a Christian sitcom. What in the world? It was a bunch of people that worked at a church came up with the idea sitting in church, and I thought, these people are funny, man. They're funny and they don't even know it. It's just so ridiculous. So I kind of like just worked on it as a hobby, and then I started pitching it, and I was getting nowhere. And then I became obsessed with it, but I needed to make a living, so I started doing a wildlife series that I had co-created with somebody else, and we got it picked up on Outdoor Channel. But the whole time I was formulating this sitcom and continually pitching it. I pitched it for 9 years. 9 years I was obsessed with this TV series, and it finally got picked up by a network called Cornerstone Television in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they moved us across the United States to Pittsburgh. And I did the first 2 seasons with them, and then I sold it to TBN, which was based in LA. But I did the 3rd season on my own. I got my own studio and did it by myself. And then I started creating and directing and producing kids shows for TBN. Well, that started to run its course. Then a network another faith-based network based in Marion, Illinois, built a studio in a place called Orchard Park, New York. And they said, why don't you come work for us and make your kid shows there? So I did. It lasted 1.5 years. And when it was ending, we were just going to go back home to the West Coast. And Matt Nardone was my DP at the time, and editor and everything. We did a lot of stuff together. And him, Tim Clark, the film commissioner, and Rich Wall said, dude, we need guys like you here. We're getting the film tax credit. You should stay. That was 13 years ago. Almost 14 years ago.
Yeah, I think when people think about movies and film, they tend to think about the West Coast, California in general. But over the years, there's been more opportunities, I think, growing on the East Coast. And since you've worked in both areas, what are some of the main differences that you've discovered?
I think I'm going back now. We've been here now 19 years. Being that that's where I was raised and I didn't know anything else but Los Angeles, when I look back, they're kind of burned out, and I could see that happening to me. I didn't want to raise my family there. Well, don't get me wrong, Los Angeles was a wonderful place to grow up when I grew up there, but I didn't like where it was going, and I didn't want to be in the business there because it was very sad as far as I was concerned. But the difference, I guess, that if I were to pinpoint one thing, is people here are kinder. I don't want to say that, but it's just the truth.
Well, after all, Buffalo is the city of good neighbors. So, I think mostly with technology making it easier for people to stay connected, you can work from anywhere, and I think that's really nice. You don't have to be stuck in a specific spot. So when it comes to stunts in general, for those that aren't familiar or for people that just want a better understanding of it, how would you describe working in stunts, and how has it maybe evolved or changed from when you first started?
Well, the evolution, well, me as as a stunt person, I started as a fall guy and a stunt fighter, and I have working knowledge of fire, precision driving, car rolls, hood rolls, pipe ramps, underwater motorcycle gags, but mainly falls of all kinds and fighting. My early background was boxing, and then military style close quarter combat, followed by martial arts. I hold 2 black belts. I'm a weapons expert in small blades, sticks, firearms safety. I'm an armor now, and I still compete in tournaments. So when I was younger, I became efficient with motorcycles and water stunts, but I really wanted to stay with where the money was and where my joy was, and that was falling in fights and firearms. I'm a huge fan of physical comedy, and I love action films, so knowing how to fall and knowing the fights were a necessity. And no matter what kind of a stunt you do, falling down is, you need to know how to fall. And you wanted to know, like, basically the evolution of fighting styles within stunts. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, since technology has made it easier to connect to different parts of the world, I think that's how we were able to learn about these new styles of combat. So, talk to us about what you've experienced over the years, and maybe provide like a brief little history lesson on fighting techniques.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Okay, I'm going to nerd out on you for a minute, and I hope you all don't get a little too bored. Okay, now before you can talk about fighting styles, first you need to understand where it all came from. At least I knew. Outside of martial arts, a guy named Bill Fairbairn was a British soldier and a police officer. He developed what's called close quarter combat methods for, of all people, the Shanghai police. Now this is pre-World War One. Well, this was seen, they did like videos or something, because it was seen by Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, Bob Leonard, who was a Keystone Cop. A lot of the viewers or listeners aren't even know what that is. Then, as we all know, it comes to the United States, and it's adapted by people like Frank Hanaway. Frank Hanaway is noted as being the very first person to do a stunt in a movie. There was a stunt person, not an actor like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, all those guys. Then it was handed down the line to people like John Barrymore, John Wayne, Vic Armstrong, Dar Robinson, Hal Needham, Ronnie Rondell, the late great Gene Upper, who we just lost last year, Michelle Yeoh, Jackie Chan, and now it's in the hands of living legends like Jack Gill, the Eberson family, Donnie Yen, Tom Cruise. You can't forget Tom Cruise, and these are just to name a few. But no, okay, which brings us to the question of fighting styles. There's so many fighting style disciplines, and most of them are centuries old. What Kung Fu is traced back to 2025 BC, don't quote me on that. There's 4 different kinds of karate, and I think it started in the 1400 AD. Now Taekwondo, they're the newest kid on the block. ITF 1955, created by a guy named General Choi. World Class Taekwondo, created in 1971, which is what you see in the Olympics. You got Muay Thai, Tai Chi, kickboxing, Aikido, Judo. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Now, all the disciplines pretty much say that they're the best. They're all right and they're all wrong. They all have their own, basically all the stances are the same, and the pattern, but they're called different names, and every one of them has their own patterns. And they're all amazing. All of them are amazing. Now, some of them have adapted close quarter combat into their self-defenses. Some of them have developed or adapted Hapkido into their disciplines. Fun fact, world-class Taekwondo, some of the self-defenses against weapons is Hapkido. Now, this was for, okay, let's talk Billy Jack. Billy Jack, probably a movie you guys don't know, is in the movies in the 70s. They introduced Hapkido to the United States of America for the first time. The hero, a guy named Tom Laughlin, his stunt double was a guy named Bong So-han. In this movie, he did Hapkido, which introduced Hapkido for the very first time ever. As far everything that I've ever been told and learned of, this is what made me become a martial artist. I went and saw Billy Jack in the theaters, and I ran home and started learning martial arts. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I didn't even know what it was. It was Hapkido, but now Hapkido was created in the 70s. Now let's fast forward all of these years to the John Wick franchise. I was just going to say the Continental, but you can't say the Continental without saying the John Wick franchise. That is mainly something called gun fu, G-U-N, and then a separate word, F-U. This is close quarter combat with a pistol. We actually just introduced this to our stunt boot camp to our students. Now, gun fu is created for theatrical, and it combines all these disciplines. It combines taekwondo, jiu-jitsu, karate, I think even more, but I'm positive those three styles are inside of it. And that's what they taught Keanu Reeves. Hence the word mixed martial arts, which when I was a kid, there was no such thing as mixed martial arts. It was called close quarter combat when I was a kid. Now, also, the camera plays a huge part in the style fights of the sequences that are what we see right now. Even though Gun Fu started in the 80s, its popularity has grown largely in part from the advanced cinematography. And think about it. When we watch it, let's take Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron, and there's a fight scene, one continuous shot with her fighting like a half a dozen guys on a staircase. One continuous shot. You think how amazing that is. Think about it. There was a camera person in that fight too. That is ridiculous. So that camera person is just as important as the stunt fighters and the actors. I'm going to stop nerding out on that topic. I hope everybody understood what I was saying.
No, I think it's quite interesting, actually. This little history lesson, for those that, take stunts and fighting seriously, that they can understand the context of how things came to be and then implement that into their process so they can continue to grow and evolve.
I agree.
Right? So for those that may not have the formal education, I feel like there could be some misconceptions about fighting and stunts. So that could potentially have negative impacts. So talk to us about some of the misconceptions that people have towards stunts and fighting in general.
Okay. We get people come to us all the time and they'll say, I want to be a stunt performer because I'm crazy and I'm tough. These are not good traits to be a stunt performer. You need to be very cautious, safe, level-headed. Okay, I'm an excitable guy. I get excited. I'm passionate about this. But when it comes to stunts, my demeanor changes, slows down. I believe you need to stay what I call in the 0 point. This is where being a martial artist for many, many years and being an elite fighter has taught me when you can't get too emotional. Happy, sad, glad, scared needs to stay at what I call the 0 point. So you can think, and most importantly, the most important thing in doing a stunt or doing martial arts or any kind of physical... Oh, let me clarify something. I've never been in a fight a day in my life, so I don't know what happens on the streets. I only know what happens in a ring, on a mat, in front of a camera. But the most important thing there is breathing. And you can't do that if you let any emotion take you into a direction. You've got to stay controlled and keep your breathing controlled. And this is with martial arts. This is on a mat. This is in front of a camera. I love high falls. I absolutely love high falls. I can't get up there and let any emotion take me over. I have to stay centered and focused and be in that moment, or you can get hurt. So being crazy is probably the worst trait you can ever have for a stunt performer. And being tough is not really needed either. Oh, sure, you've got to be a bit resilient. But if you come into this thinking, oh, I'm tough and I can get hurt and I can handle it, you're in the wrong business.
It makes a lot of sense. And sure, there are new methods and technology that can make the production safer, while making it look cooler too. And this is something that happens over and over again. And I think most people think about it as like this single instance. Plus, it happens over a period of time.
Or 40 years.
Yeah. You're just making things safe and organized in a controlled environment. So thank you for clarifying that. And to wrap up this interview, looking back at all of your experiences, what would you like to leave with our listeners today?
I thought about this question. When I look back on my very modest career, I believe as I was growing, there are so many times I didn't even know what I didn't know. It's great to have passion and a desire for something, but take the time to learn. At the risk of sounding like an old guy, I hear people all the time say, I've been working at this so long and so hard and I'm not getting anywhere, and I'll ask, how long you been doing it? And they'll say 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. I don't say anything, but I'll say it right now. That's like 2 months in filmmaking time. If you truly belong where you are, stay true to yourself, understand you will never stop learning and you don't want to stop learning, and accept setbacks and failures and just keep moving forward. A grandmaster taught me something in life, and it works just in general. Know what you want, have a plan, take consistent action. Throughout my life, there was something I would never stop, and I would never ever stop doing this. I just everything rolled off me. Failure, it just over and over and over again. But I just kept on doing it. I kept taking consistent action. So it was like 20 years later, or 15 years later, whenever it was, that this person said, know what you want, have a plan, take consistent action. By just dumb luck or design, I've always been doing that. So know what you want, have a plan, take consistent action. And folks, please try to enjoy the journey. Every time I work, at some point or another on a job, I'll say to myself, wow, this may be the last time I get to do this. So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to enjoy myself, stay in the moment, and I'm going to enjoy the people that I'm doing it with. If you're, okay, and learn. If you're trying to get a project distributed, don't get me started on distribution. I can do a 3-hour seminar strictly on distribution and the mistakes that I've made and the things that I've learned. Learn distribution. If you learn the business, it's called show business for a reason. If you want to be a stunt performer, learn the skills. If you want to be an actor, learn the craft, and you know that you're going to keep learning. Everything we do, we learn. But after that, we don't go, oh, I learned it, now I know it, and that's it. No, you've got to cultivate it. It's just throwing a punch. You know, when I first started doing martial arts a million years ago, they started talking about a punch, and I'm like, it's a punch, is just a punch. Well, then I learned all the science and all the technology behind a punch, and years of what? Cultivating, falling, roll, doing a stair roll over and over again. Well, now a punch is just a punch, but I've got tens of thousands of experience behind that punch. I have hundreds of times jumping off a roof of a building or the garage, rolling downstairs, doing car rolls, because I'm constantly learning, constantly cultivating it. So know that you need to cultivate it for a lifetime, and it never ends. What is that? The infinity? Where you notice how there's no end there? That's us learning in the movie business.
Yeah, wasn't it Bruce Lee that said, I fear the man who does one kick 100 times compared to the man who does 100 kicks once, or something like that?
Yeah, that's what we teach. You're not doing 10 reps. You're not throwing 10 kicks. You're throwing one kick 10 times.
Yeah, I've learned a thing or two along the way.
Yeah, you have. I know very few people that know that outside of a martial arts studio.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, Greg, look, you got a great story, and for those that are interested in learning more about you, what's the best way for people to continue to follow your journey?
If you're in the Buffalo area, we need stunt people. It's not something you can learn on the job. So go to robinsstuntteam.com and find out about upcoming boot camps. And that's about it. Sure, I'm always trying to produce my own stuff, but for the most part, trying to build a solid stunt team in Western New York, because thanks to the governor giving us a really good film tax credit, and thanks to the film commissioner and our mayor rolling out the red carpet for all these movies, and thanks to all of my colleagues that have learned so much and become the best support crew I've ever known in my entire life, we are able to make movies right here in our own backyard. There's nothing better than getting up and going to work and coming home and sleeping in your own bed. But we don't have a lot of stunt people, and this is not something you can learn on the job. Go to robinsstunt.com or find us on Facebook, and if this is something you want, give me a call.
Excellent. Well, that concludes another episode of Small Talk. I want to thank my guest, Greg, for joining us today.
Tony, thank you.
And I want to thank you guys for watching. You can check out all the latest episodes at tonyvideo.com/smalltalk. Be sure to like us on Facebook and definitely follow us on Instagram where you can get the latest news. See you next time.
And what the people choose ain't really up to you. Actions always find a way to shine brighter